Hello everyone, this is part 7 of What If Naruto Ran Away from Home, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Naruto could hear the TV from upstairs, through the open bedroom door. Today, at about 10 minutes after 9 in the morning, there was a terrorist attack from two Kunoichi, one of which is identified as Orochimaru of the Sannin, missing ninja of Konohagakure no Sato, the other of which cannot be identified and is so far not linked to any village. He guessed that an artist sketch of a masked Mikoto came up on the screen. The attack was against a snow country visitor by the name Sue Asiaka as he returned from shopping in King Bolt Superstore. A picture of Sue replaced that of Mikoto's image. Naruto wasn't too worried that his records would be confirmed to be in the Snow Country servers because he was very thorough in his background creation. The officer that allowed Sue into Kumo has said that he admitted to being easily mistaken for the son of the Yondaime Hokage. His location is currently not known, but his last confirmed location is a field in northern Kumogakure where it is speculated that he fought the two terrorists and 5 more so far unidentified infiltrators. Here is an eyewitness's video recording of the fight in front of King Bolt Superstore. The young genius closed his eyes and listened to the sounds of people screaming. A loud thud of what he could only guess was when he hit his right foot on the ground. Sue is reportedly a civilian of Snow Country and has not reported in the PTP registration office of Snow Country that he has any sort of taijutsu training or technologically combative weaponry on his person or in his possession. Until the situation concerning the terrorists, the infiltrators and Sue Asiaka's health have been confirmed, Lord Raikage has ordered there to be a shutdown of all non-essential activities within Kumogakure. The borders have been closed and the police and ninja are in collaboration in the search for Sue. We ask that all civilians and genin remain indoors until this situation is solved and that anyone with any kind of helpful information report it to the necessary authorities. The Raikage of Kumo came up, saying in his recognizably deep voice. All we want are answers. He cleared his voice and seemed to adjust himself in his office seat. The safety of my people is top priority, and if we have somehow invited a security risk into our village, it is in our best interest to arrest him and bring him in for questioning. As of now, Sue Asiaka, engineering major of Snow University, is wanted for interrogation. He fixed the camera with a strong look, lacing his fingers together on his desk. Sue, if you're watching this, come quietly. Naruto scoffed. The newscaster cleared his throat nervously. That was Lord A. Thankfully, no one was harmed in the attack. We at Channel 7 implore that citizens be patient and cooperative to authority. On to other news, the bounty on the son of the Yondaime Hokage, Uzumaki Naruto, has been decreased by 500 million Ru, by order of Lord Raikage. The TV buzzed on and Naruto's mind briefly wandered. The Raikage definitely knew he was Naruto and not Sue, but he didn't want to cause general panic that the wanted boy was in the village. The supposed grandparents Sue had in Snow were on vacation in mountain country, so the authorities of Snow Country couldn't get in contact with them. Snow University had records of his graduating, but past students would say they didn't remember any Sue Asiaka. Naruto, as usual, wasn't worried. He would disappear like had done before. Any trace to him had been cleaned up already. The Akatsuki were currently cooling in the mountain hideout he had fashioned for himself. Their weapons were with them. Conan was still unconscious, lying haphazardly on the cold, hard floor. He shifted a little and winced. Damn it. Still no painkillers, and since the village was practically on fire, on red alert, he wouldn't be getting any the right way anytime soon. I'm going to bed, Dad. So soon. But there's no school tomorrow. Hope you're okay. Naruto set his left hand on the arm of the desk chair and faced it at the door, humming lowly with plasma energy. The girl's father was concerned because Cassie had been close to the initial attack, Naruto guessed, reducing the intensity of his beam from plasma to photon. I'm just, really tired. Drilling a 15-year-old girl questions for the better part of the day could do that. Are you sure? I'm fine, Dad. Good night. The girl stomped up the stairs and the door creaked open. She entered. The room was pitch black and she made to flick on the switch but stopped when she saw a pair of red eyes in the dark corner of her room where her desk was, and a quietly humming white light sitting on the arm of her chair. Shush, Naruto whispered. He remained immobile, pointing his humming red-palmed glove at the frightened girl, ever ready to melt her torso if she made the wrong move. The darkness of the corner of the room he sat in did nothing to drive the fear of Kami into her. Blood-red eyes shone from her desk chair. He motioned for her to enter fully. "Shut the door, Cassie," quietly. The girl paled and frantically nodded, slowly closing the door with trembling hands. Her whole body quaked with fear, still holding the doorknob with her eyes clenched shut. Naruto saw her shoulders shake and he leaned back into his seat with a small sigh. "Step away from the door, Cassie." She bobbed her head quickly and walked backwards, clearly scared of even looking at him. She moved to the other side of the room and covered her face with her hands. "Don't scream." She nodded again. A guest speaker at her former middle school, a retired Junin, had said that to avoid harm in the occurrence of a home invasion was to follow the orders of the person without hesitation. She recognized the red eyes of the person sitting in the dark as the person she had met in the morning, the one building the giant magnet. She had a front row view of his fighting skills and the tech he had on him. He was now a fugitive. "Sit down." She plopped down on the edge of her bed, still not looking at him and shaking something furious, more scared than anything in her life. The girl watched the mocha-skinned girl in silence and exhaled again, powering down his left glove and kicking his feet before him under the desk, crossing his ankles. "I'm not going to hurt you, Cassie," he stated and slipped his hand from his computer glove, which still stayed on the arm of the desk chair, and wiggled them. She peeked between her fingers. "Hey, are you going to kidnap me?" She got a good look at him then, her gray eyes squinting in confusion at his state. He was wearing a short-sleeved black shirt with a noughts and crosses design on the front and black pants that stopped over his ankles with black sneakers, the same he wore that morning. Over his torso was a dark blue hoodie, with the hoodie flopping back. His right hand wasn't in the sleeve and she clearly saw a metal contraption on his right arm, held up by a white sling. His left hand, slung through the hoodie sleeve, and she noticed that the thing that formerly shone white was a black glove with a red palm, sitting comfortably on the arm of her chair. There was a small backpack sitting at his feet and a pair of goggles on her desk, next to her computer. He shook his head with a snort. He cleared his throat. "I need your help, Cassie." Her hands dropped and her mouth opened to speak, but he beat her to it. "Nothing illegal, I promise." He stood up with a grunt, his unfirm left hand holding him up by the desk. He ambled to her and, to her surprise, he plopped down by her side with a pained groan. "You're going to..." She moved away from him slightly, her eyes wide and fearful. "No," he said with an exhale. "I won't do that." She was still in her work clothes of a yellow and white shirt, black pants with the work name tag on her left chest, heavily perspiring from a day of constant activity. Her mind turned. "Then what do you want with me?" "Help me build my magnet." He shook his head and interrupted her. "It won't take more than an hour. I have the exact schematics with me and the instructions in perfect detail. I'll be out of your hair and you'll never hear from me again, I promise." Her eyebrows moved up her forehead. "Why can't you do it? I don't know anything about magnets. My arm is busted, so if I do it, it's most likely I'll slow myself down if anything, and you know enough to identify I wanted to make a magnet by just looking at my trolley. That doesn't prove anything. I looked through your school record." He didn't look at her surprised face. "You've been at top of your class since the start of your schooling year and your teachers have written comments on how, if you pass your next 5 tests with distinction they would recommend you for a class promotion. How? I'm good with computers." Her mouth gaped wordlessly at his words. He looked at her. "I'll pay you. Pay me. 10 million. Her eyes grew to the side of dinner plates and she yelled. 10 mil. He covered her mouth with his left hand. "Quiet." He dropped his hand when he was sure she won't scream. 2.5 million in 4 accounts, all in your name but under different aliases so no one gets suspicious. He smiled slightly at her flabbergasted face, the question unsaid all over her expression. "Like I said, I'm good with computers. But, she gurgled, trying to find her voice. "What am I going to do with 10 million Ru? Whatever you want, as long as you don't say where you got it from or run stir crazy spending it. I'm just a freshman, the biggest magnet I've ever built was as small as my hand. Consider this a lesson then." Naruto flicked his left hand and his bag whizzed to him. He stopped it with his foot and unzipped it, bringing out a flat disc-shaped piece of metal with a small pane of circular glass on top. He tossed it to the ground and said, Activate satellite magnet schematics. Her eyes bugged out as beams of light shot out from the disk, colored images of rectangular files rolled out above, revolving in a circle before their eyes. He swiped his right hand through the light and picked out one. Ah, yes, Model 11. His fingers tapped the folder and it opened, revealing image after image of magnets he had designed himself. Written instructions and step-by-step illustrations flew around the room in glorious, coordinated streams of light. This is, she whispered, a door. Wow. She tore her eyes from the images and looked at him, stars in her eyes. How? He answered with a lopsided smile. I'll walk you through whatever you don't get. He got up and walked to her window, drawing the blinds to allow in the star-speckled light of the countryside, a comfortable distance from Kumo proper. Outside hovered a platform that puffed air from the bottom and sides, silently and without any possible detection. Atop the hovering platform were all the tools she needed. He stood back and the platform slipped into the room and gently landed on the ground. She ran to the supplies with crazed eyes and he walked around the board to his bag, retrieving a flash drive and a long black cord. There is an auto demagnetizer in my bag, so don't worry about the magnet going off randomly. The hologram is easy enough to use. Swipe left and right, up and down, diagonally, whatever, or if you have a good memory you can memorize the names of the illustrations and say it out loud. There really wasn't an end to the amazement this red-eyed boy was bringing her. Everything she needed to build the magnet lay before her and the plans flew around her. You have to be quiet though, I don't have the tech to muffle sounds, not anything big enough to cover a room. Cassie looked at him. In her hands was a long roll of copper wires. What will you be doing? Call me Sue. He used his foot to move the desk chair before the desk, keeping his back to her and setting down the flash drive and the cord beside the goggles. I'll be borrowing your computer for another project. He went back to his bag and removed a similar holo disk from inside, throwing it accurately to the desk and pulling out the last object he needed, a small box helpfully labeled repair kit. His holo disk wasn't as good as his hologram projectors, in Naruto's opinion, because the projectors provided a wider range of services, while he could only store a specific amount of information in the disk seeing as it had limited memory space. What do you possibly want to do with my computer? She asked in bewilderment. This guy practically had technology better than Kumo could ever make in the next 50 or so years. Her computer too was an old model and this dude had hologram disks. He sat down and grinned at her a little. I want to fix my friend. She didn't even want to ask. Her cheeks tinted red in embarrassment at the quiet laughter of the young genius. She then stood up and probed. How do you know I haven't told the police I gave you my number? She spun around on his chair and said with a close-eyed smile. Because you haven't. She sniffed, rubbing her cheeks to rid herself of her stubborn blush. Fair enough. Cassie watched as he opened the repair kit and took out a tiny screwdriver, using it to unscrew the screen on the goggles and revealing a dizzying array of wires and chips. He then turned on her computer and said to the holo disk on the desk. Bring up iRepair schematics. He looked into the melted cluster of wires and chips and muttered, when the holo disk flickered on and running through a few files before landing on the one where he detailed how to repair I during the event of it being damaged. Burnt processor and cracked sensory disks. The repair folder flipped through a few sub-files and stopped at the scenario he had written concerning the words he had just said. Restoration or replacement. The lights blinked red and the boy sighed. He only had one usable hand, so it was going to be very hard. Ah, replacement it is. He then plugged in one end of the black cord into the goggles and the other into the fully booted computer, sliding in the flash drive a moment later after 3 lights in the goggles blinked red 3 times. He went back to the goggles and used his screwdriver to remove the processor chip. He put in a new processor chip from his pocket and the computer screen tinkled. Backup files. Naruto moved the mouse and clicked. Comprehensive restoration of backup files or specific restoration of backup files. Naruto clicked. Comprehensive. Error. Damaged memory chip. New processor chip detected. Naruto breathed out tiredly and went to his goggles, saying, damaged memory chip. The holo disk swiped to the instructions Naruto had written if I's memory chip was ever broken. He took out a different screwdriver, this one about the same small size but fizzling at the tip with electricity. He tapped and poked her and there, looking to the instructions and back again, recalling as best as he could and confirming once again. He didn't really forget how to fix his own computer. It was so that he didn't make any mistake in fixing I. He clicked on comprehensive again. New processor chip detected. Naruto checked the memory chip. It was good. Then he readjusted the processor chip, humming with approval that it was in the right place. He moved back to the computer and clicked on comprehensive again, selecting ignore when the alert came up. Loading backup files. Would you like to review them? Click yes. He scratched his chin as every single file on I came up on the screen, neatly arranged into time-stamped files and arranged into even more detail, like on response to instruction, logical reasoning, environmental observations, lessons from boss and many, many more. Thousands more. The fingers of his left hand swiftly moved on the keyboard and the screen blacked out. A complicated roll of numbers ran up the screen and the blonde boy looked at each set of numbers intently. He then said to his silent observer, "Get to work, Cassie." Right. He studied the codes with extreme focus and then clacked his fingers on the keyboard again, satisfied that the codes for I were in order. The screen returned back to normal. He looked to the hologram on the repair of his supercomputer's burnt processor chip. He could easily replace the cracked sensory discs, but that could be done later seeing as he didn't have them on him. They were in the mountain base. There was hope that I would come back from digital death, but the question was if it would be the same as before. Naruto had programmed I to back up every single bit of data it had every 5 seconds of every 5 days, making the thousands upon thousands of data on Cassie's computer the most comprehensive set of information on the planet. He had checked himself. The backup included deflecting the Tsukuyomi and the I's codes were up to date, including the ones with the recent update in them. He had set a date for his rocket to take off from Earth, next week, and he wouldn't allow his broken arm to push that date back. He had most of the parts ready. The fuel tank and gallons of fuel were in Demon Country, the satellite's receivers were in the mountain, the thrusters and the capsule could be built just as quickly. What Naruto wouldn't stand for was for I, his computer companion, to not be with him for any longer. Hence why he had asked Cassie to help him with the satellite magnet while he fixed I. Activate goggles. The lights of the goggles flicked from red to green, meaning it was activated but not operational. He slid the holo disc to the goggles and said, "Connect goggles to holo disc. Show me I's brain." The brain that came up was greatly different to the one he saw in his cliffside base. The numbers were still, unmoving and cold, and it was all squeezed into a perfect, tight sphere. It was a lifeless black. Nothing moved on the brain, nothing pulsed. Dead. Naruto blinked his eyes to stop the tears from coming. Not now, he bit, more to himself than anything. The end of the flash drive blinked blue once and a different file appeared before Naruto. Retrieved I files. Merge with I backup files and restore. He clicked the mouse. OK. On the computer screen, a dialog box opened up with a file throwing a sheet of paper to another file, over and over again, while the black hologram of I's brain slowly started filling up with blue light, from bottom to top, like it was a water balloon. He sat back in his chair and swerved around towards a busily reading and working Cassie, lost in thought. Flashback, 6 hours ago. 4:09 p.m. Naruto's mountain base. Conan woke up with a start, gasping and looking around the sun-illuminated surroundings she had found herself in. The walls were made from chiseled rock, and so was the ground. There was a wide opening before her, far, far before her, meaning that she was in a cave somewhere. She looked to her right and started when she caught a pair of yellow, snake-like eyes. The person was sickly pale with dark bags underneath her eyes with streaking black hair. Her mouth was gagged and Conan tried to speak, ask where she was, only to realize her mouth was covered as well. The angel of Am made to move her hands but wheezed, weaker than she had ever felt in a very long time. Ropes bit into her wrists and her ankles, tying both in a special knot that held them together but separate enough that dislocating her wrists would free her from the rope. Her arms were uncomfortably tied to her side, making her hands forcefully kept down on her lower back, and her thighs were also tied together, tight. She was on her knees, like the snake-eyed woman. Her foggy memory tried to remember what she had been doing previously. Who was she? Who was this lady? Where was she? What had she been doing? Questions and questions flooded painfully through her head, and she cried into her gag, muffled and almost non-existent, as a sharp headache flashed through her head. When she opened her eyes again, cautiously, she saw her Akatsuki garb lying on the ground close to the mouth of the cave, but not by much, soaked in engine oil, used like a rag for what they could not even guess. Akatsuki. Yes, she was in the Akatsuki. Her name was Ka-no-ki, no Conan, yes. Angel of Am. It all came back to her, and the snake-eyed lady's eyes curved up with amusement as the normally expressionless paper angel looked raptured at the things coming into her head. She too had gone through this temporary amnesia not too long ago, and it wasn't pleasant. Not by a long shot. She almost jumped when Conan futilely tried to move again. Orochimaru tutted in reprimand. They both had their chakra sealed. Well, all three of them, if she counted Mikoto, but the Konoha Kanoiki was a lost cause at this point. She knew the signs of being in a Sharingan-induced genjutsu, from years of study and training. Her thoughts came back to her when she heard Conan mutely squawking in surprise, extremely out of character for her, and saw the pile of dead bodies to her immediate left. Kakazu, Toby, Itachi, and who she could only guess was hidden, because all that remained of his were a pair of legs connected to a pelvis. What happened to them? They were sent out on a mission, yes. To kill. Who? Good. You're both awake. Someone said 4 feet before both kneeling Kanoiki. He was in predominantly dark clothes, with a sling holding up his broken arm, hidden beneath a dark hoodie. The thing he wanted to do required that both be awake. He had on a different pair of goggles. This one was roughly the same size as his normal pair but was a bright shade of white with a black tinted screen. He had taken a long nap since the fight and every movement didn't feel like hell anymore. His chakra was back at approvable, usable levels and he had the opportunity to clean himself up. They saw a blue hexagon spinning before Naruto's right eye, on the computer goggles, and the red eye behind the spinning shape looked down at them with ominous darkness. Orochimaru grinned despite her gag and squealed. Nato. He shot her a look that silenced her. The human brain, the mind, is like a safe. With the exact right combination it can be opened and all within can be used. The thing is that, from what I know, the contents within the mind can be likened to codes on a computer. Thoughts, emotions, observations, memories, whether positive or negative, spinning around in the storm that is the mind. He stepped to Orochimaru and held his left hand away from him to the side. His glove whizzed and clicked in place onto his hand, though not arming. Every person has a different combination to crack the safe that is the brain. Once the brain has been opened, then the safecracker can not only gather whatever he or she wants from the target's mind, alter those memories and influence them. It's almost like playing a guitar, strike the right chords and pluck the right strings and we have a harmony of sounds, but in this case, adjusting, and retouching, individual memories and thoughts, even emotions, can end with the victim being effectively brainwashed. He bent down and looked the snake woman right in her eyes. Understand what I'm saying? Orochimaru gulped. I won't be dumb enough to tell either of you how I'm going to get this done. He poked the growingly irate scientist's head. What I will do, is copy what's inside your head, both of you, and change whatever the hell I want. He wasn't lying when he said he could crack open the human mind. The chakra signature setting of his goggles used to be controlled by eye, so that the computer would quickly tune into each person's individual chakra signature at record speed, but Naruto had to bring out a spare pair of gloves and painstakingly activated himself by combining infrared and inverting vision. The world before his right eye was almost pitch black, except small patches of gray. The two women before him were also different. Their interior was mostly made out of blackness, besides 7 distinct spots in their bodies and a hazy line of chakra connecting all 7 points. Their main tenketsu, Naruto thought with a wry smile, held the key to opening the mind. He heavily placed his good hand on the weakly thrashing snake woman and the woman froze as low vibrations ran from his palm, into her head and into her 7 tenketsu. Her mouth dropped open and her eyes rolled up into the back of her head as her mental defenses came undone at his slight prodding. The chakra points fell apart and the glove processed the almost willing feedback of information from the woman's head. His computer goggles analyzed them and turned the data into readable, understandable information for the young inventor. A sharp beam of light shot from the back of Naruto's gloved hand and he looked up, marveling at the outstanding mind of Konoha's most wanted ninja. It was a motley green and gray color, like her disgusting chakra, roughly shaped like a normal brain, and it gurgled and spat above him, churning slowly with subtle activity. The scientist's mind was truly extensive, for lack of a better word. There was everything, from taijutsu to some engineering work, to medicine to shinobi catalogs, to Kekai Genkai replication to hidden village weaknesses, to blackmail and ninja weaknesses, to medical tests and scientific experiments, to memories of the second and third shinobi wars. Everything. Naruto smirked. I'll admit, this is a lot. His visors blurred with activity and his smirk widened into a full-blown grin. Where do I even start with this thing? A hollow sound echoed from the Sannin's mouth and he chuckled, a foreign sound to Conan's ear. Copy everything, Naruto said after a short pause. The spare goggles made a tinkling sound and started scanning through the brain of the self-proclaimed strongest Sannin. Organize it all into specific folders, taijutsu into taijutsu, ninjutsu into ninjutsu, and so on. The bottom left of the goggles blinked blue once. For the scientific experiments, do the same thing, clump them all into the same file but, he said, making sure to emphasize how serious he was. Do not, and I mean, do not copy memories of her torturing kids. 3 minutes later and it was done, not as fast as I would have done it but the spare computer had done its best, all according to its creator's instruction. Naruto's limited though still immensely expansive studies and research into the human body, which would go a long way in his designs of his gloves and boots, was what had brought his attention to the effects of low, nearly unheard and unfelt sound and vibrations on the human body. He knew that emitting a person-specific sound from his goggles or gloves would result in the target's system being turned off for a long period of time, but Naruto had recently discovered the effect of accompanying the low sound to low vibrations with Obito. In the ninja's last moments, as he used the high-pitched squeal to tear down his chakra, he had felt not only the tenketsu disconnect itself from the man's body but there had been a strange click under his hand. For most that won't have meant anything. Hell, for most, they won't have even felt the click. The sensation for a target's chakra being flicked off was like water was rushing out of the target, invisible, unfelt and unheard water, but this time there was a click. It was a long shot and it was likely to fail, but he tried the sound and vibration combination on Obito's corpse. The brainwaves had long since stopped and the body was cooling but the boy was able to gather surface memories, which were memories from the past year and not from the beginning of his life. This included emotions felt within this time frame and thoughts that went through his head. He copied it all. Itachi's mind too. He couldn't with Kakazu because he had previously blown out his brain and for Hiden he had disintegrated his whole upper body, and even if he could with Hiden he wouldn't. The priest was reputably insane, he wouldn't bother with him. Naruto wasn't sure if he could actually alter these memories but there was no other available guinea pig to use but these two experienced Kunoichi. He would go to Mikoto later and see what he could scavenge from her mind. The frequency of the vibration changed, humming lower and lower, while the pitch of the sound increased to just a quiet whistle. The hologram of Orochimaru's brain expanded over his head. He pinpointed the part of her brain that was absolutely obsessed with him. He prodded that spot on her mind, a light touch, and it bent into itself like a field after a bomb had been dropped, warping those memories drastically. He could gather that her ultimate plan for him was to recruit him to her side, brainwash him into loyalty and then steal his body and his knowledge. The thoughts were perverse, involving dreams and wishes to ravage him over and over again. He wiped away that plan for him. He touched another side of her mind and it curved into itself, like before, as if his touch meant death. He wasn't quite sure what he had done, not really, but he was too excited to find out. He removed his hand and the woman fell to her side, shaking and convulsing. She finally came to. Orochimaru felt defiled, like her whole body had been used as a rag to clean up jizz from a male member, over and over again. Her throat was parched and she licked her lips, wetting them and praying she didn't taste semen. She exhaled in relief when she didn't. She cleared her throat and looked around, briefly confused on where she was and why she was tied up, though her body shivered at the feeling of losing what dignity she had as, used continuously without remorse or conscience. Naruto bent down on one knee before her and her eyes bulged. A scream ripped out from her soul. She fell down onto her face and vainly tried to wiggle away, like some sort of twisted worm, but when that didn't work, Orochimaru of the Sannin started blubbering for mercy. Begging and pleading for leniency. Gentle hands laced through her hair and violently yanked her up, forcing her to look into the cold visors of the tech genius. His twisted smirk served only to drive a stake into her heart, chilling her down to her soul. "You're scared of me?" he whispered. He released her and her face crashed back to the ground, her nose cracked messily and bled around her. "I can use this." He kicked her side lightly, turning her over from her face to her side. He grabbed her cheeks with his left hand, having to gently move his right arm a bit to do so. "I want you to do something for me, Orochimaru. Anything." She screamed pitifully. "I want you to watch my back from afar," he said, stressing the last parts. You're going to go back to Naruto and tear down everything you have concerning me, rip it all to shreds. Tell your ninjas to stay away from me and you are to do so yourself, until I tell you otherwise. He looked up in thought, mulling over something in his mind, before he said. Also, convince as many hidden villages and countries as possible to take me off their wanted lists and their bingo books, starting from here in Kumo. Use violence if you have to, I don't care. Understood? Yes, sir, of course, sir. She slurred and he pushed her face away, swiping his hand at a single rope on her lower back. A bolt of photon light cut the rope and the rest fell apart. He bent down and jabbed her neck, releasing her chakra for her. Get lost. As Orochimaru fled the mountain base, Naruto turned to the purple-haired angel with a dark smile. He couldn't very well send Orochimaru to Konoha specifically. His mother would tear Orochimaru to pieces and intensify her efforts in retrieving her son. He needed someone stronger. He placed his hand on Conan's head, ignoring her useless struggling and shaking, and opened up her mind. Maybe she knew someone he could use. Flashback end. The Kumogakure news station was hiding information from the public. A few minutes after Naruto had let Orochimaru off, there had been an attempt on the Raikage's life by the Mad Sannin. The insane snake woman had yelled at her opponent, both at a stalemate in the power department, that if he did not leave Naruto Uzumaki alone, then Orochimaru would gas the whole village. The Raikage knew the scientist could and would do that. The Raikage was faster but Orochimaru was smarter. She could think of a few slick moves to make the man's legendary speed, rivaling that of the Yellow Flash, into a nuisance than a blessing. He called back his hunter ninjas and changed his tactics from looking for Naruto to looking for Sue, carefully skirting what he was told not to do. He had limited his search to inside his village. For the sake of his people, he needed to play it safe. Naruto jumped in his seat and slid his left glove onto his one good hand, not fully armed but glowing a dim white, ready with a photon beam, at the door when he heard heavy footfalls coming up the stairs. Cassie, flinching in surprise at the blurring movement, quietly shouted. My dad. Naruto looked at her with furrowed eyebrows. She pointed at the door and stood up, skittering to the door with hesitant steps. It's my dad. He wanted to ask how she was so sure but stopped himself. The guest house her father owned had 15 rooms, 3 of which were occupied, 1 by her, 1 by him and 1 by an actual guest. Business wasn't too good but they were getting through life fairly fine. He noticed that she had been working with her long, wavy white hair tied up in a messy ponytail on top of her head, and she had rolled up the short sleeves of her yellow and white work shirt, showing her thin light brown arms and a curious-looking gash on her right shoulder. The tiredness from before fled her a long time ago. When Naruto asked her to build his magnet for him, the money wasn't really on her mind but the detailed information Naruto had allowed her to read concerning magnets would surely come in handy with her homework. Cassie grabbed the doorknob and glared at the blonde boy, a bit stronger. It's my dad. The boy frowned slightly and lowered his hand, powering down the glove and lifting his left hand in surrender. Fine. Have it your way. Her tough exterior crumbled at his last words and her cheeks burned with embarrassment. She slapped her cheeks with both of her hands and unrolled her work shirt sleeves. She slipped outside just as the man was about to enter. Naruto listened to their conversation from the thin crack of the open door. I thought you'd be sleeping by now. It seemed he wanted to walk around her into her room but the girl stopped him with a small shout, blocking his way with her body. I was hearing voices from your room. It's nothing, I was about to get something to drink. She yawned, a fake sound that didn't appease the man. Are you sure you're not doing something weird in there? She snorted. You're 15, your body is changing in ways even I don't understand. Daddy, why stop? She squealed again when he wanted to peer into her room. Are you sure you don't have anyone in your room with you? He looked at her with knowing eyes and a small smirk. The girl's face was practically red. A boy, maybe. A boy. Her voice was high-pitched, yet somehow disbelieving of his suspicions. Why would I have a boy in my room? Ridiculous. Naruto rolled his eyes and glanced at the progress of the backup and retrieval of his computer friend. 20%. You're at that age of getting more and more curious. Nuu. She groaned pitifully and pushed her cackling father away, her thin arms and slim, petite gait not doing much against the thundering, muscular form of her father civilian. Goo. Naruto began to wonder, was this how normal teenagers behaved? Flustered, emotional and hormonal. He didn't know. His childhood didn't exactly expose him to great examples of a person's teenage years, and the most he knew were from romantic movies his mother, Mikoto, and a whole wave of other females watched during the weekend. He was forced to watch with them, acting as the group plushie. He refused to believe that all teens were perpetually being ravaged by love-related emotions and the urge to break out into song. He could guess that Cassie didn't have that many male friends, so she wasn't too sure on how to react at being accused of having a boy in her room, of all places. She was also nearly always blushing when she looked at him, which he didn't quite understand, but he didn't really have enough concern in him to question. She wasn't sick, as far as he knew, so it wasn't anything serious. The boy had done his digging on Cassie's family. Her mother passed away when she was younger, and her father had been working as a blacksmith before he used his savings to buy a guest house. His wife's older brother was a retired junin, and he had 2 children, Darui, Karui and Omoi, from oldest to youngest, with Darui being the apprentice to the rakeage, Karui and Omoi being on the same genin team as Simui, under their sensei Kirabi, also known as Kilabi, the 8-tailed Jinchuriki, who was in turn the younger brother to the rakeage. Naruto had traced the digital history to the very last person, going as far as finding out that Simui had a brother named Archoi, and Kirabi had a podcast where he displayed his deplorable rapping skills. Nothing was ever safe when Naruto got his hands on his tablet or his goggles, spare or eye. Cassie was fairly trustworthy, not giving up the fact that she gave her number to sue to the Kumo Black Ops or the police. For the life of him, Naruto didn't want anything to happen to her because of her association with him, like with Hino, the top Yakuza enforcer, and, to a lesser extent, Shion, the demon country daimyo. He got up from the chair and staggered to the door as it opened, the girl crying for him not to enter, tugging the back of his shirt in a vain attempt at pulling him back. The door swung open, the mountain of a man's stormy gray eyes darkened when he saw Naruto and summarily closed peacefully when the boy raised his left hand, pointer and middle finger jutting out from the fist, and poked his forehead in a blaze of speed. Sleep. The man swayed from side to side, then the boy bent forward and caught him on his back, grunting under the weight. The girl opened her mouth to scream, but the boy, adjusting the weight on his back and hefting the father up onto his shoulder with only one arm, said, "He's just sleeping." True to his words, the man started snoring, a deep, rumbling sound that felt like a landslide on his back. The girl looked astonished at the display, surprised a boy with a broken arm could still carry one as large as her father, and also that he had put him to sleep with one muttered word and a jab to the face. Disorientation genjutsu applied straight to the brain can induce dizziness and cause sleep within 0.5 seconds, against casting the disorientation genjutsu from a distance, which will just cause mild dizziness and nausea. He said, answering her unvoiced question. Her mind tried to wrap itself around what he had just said. The thing with illusions was that, so as not to be detected, they had to be cast while the user touched the target. The chakra control needed to disorientate and maintain a near-invisible chakra presence was outstanding, and the civilian girl wouldn't really get that point. Where's his room? She numbly led him to the room next to hers, and Naruto dropped the man into his bed. Trust me, he'll be fine. He'll be a bit lightheaded in the morning. That's all. Okay, she conceded, after checking his breathing, his pulse, and confirming again with his loud snores. Cassie covered her father with a warm blanket and closed his bedroom door with a faint click. She led the way back into her room and shut the door, locking it. Her gray eyes watched the boy slid back into the chair, cautious. Are you a ninja or are you an engineer? Which is it? 'Cause I'm confused. I'm some kid that wants to find some peace of mind in a world that doesn't want to give him peace of mind. That doesn't even make sense. He grinned at her. I know. He spared a look at what she had done with the magnet and then said, "Can I borrow your phone?" She practically chucked it at him, irritated. "Take it, I don't care anymore." Interest flooded into her orbs when his left fingers tapped the screen, sliding and swiping with masterful ease. "What are you doing this time?" He tried to think of how to explain it to her. "I'm upgrading your phone's security. If Kumo technicians hack into it, they would be diverted to a false phone." "Why?" "Because I'm bored and your phone has paw in it." She dove at him, trying to snatch away her phone from his grasp. "I don't have po." He raised the phone away from her insistent hand, still tapping without looking. "I didn't even need to hack into your phone to know. It's all over your face." He wasn't offended at the girl's apparent sexual curiosity, but rather he was deeply amused. Her perversions weren't trained on him but rather, apparently, on a popular Fire Country porn actress named Yugi. Her mortification was endearing. Gimme it. He laughed and pushed her away with his right foot, tinkering with her phone for a few more seconds before he tossed it back to her. I also scrubbed your selfie camera. Don't want anyone to watch you while you're doing yourself. If her face turned any more red, Naruto would have felt concerned. Steam blasted from her ears as she curled up into herself, hugging the phone, and her shame, with all her might. I read it's natural for teens to be curious. Naruto snorted, tumbling into another belly laugh. The dark-skinned girl silently glared at him, swiveled around and stomped to the magnet she was building. She had had more than enough awkward embarrassments and revelations from this boy for one night. Ignoring me, huh? He asked with a teasing smile. Cassie puffed out her red cheeks and nodded once. That's fine, I know Yugi, you know. Her head could not snap up any faster. He looked away, slyly buffing his left fingernails on his shirt. I used to bartend for her brothel, but that's a long time ago, in a past life. Know what I mean? He saw the war of indecision on her face, so he said, frankly and with a twinkle in his eyes. I'm not going to set up a meeting with you two. Why not? She spat before she could cover his mouth with her hands. You're 15. So, you're 15. He repeated. End of discussion. Her head lowered again, puffing out her cheeks and rigidly building Naruto's magnet. She grumbled. Well, that's stupid. Why'd you even say that if you're not going to help me out? Because I'm bored. PSHH whatever. Need any pointers? No. He settled back in the chair and his mind went back to a memory from a few hours ago. Flashback. 5 hours, 30 minutes ago. 4:39 p.m. Naruto's mountain base. Conan collapsed onto her side, passed out, and Naruto scoffed. So much for being an angel. Conan's power level was about as equal to Orochimaru's and Itachi's, yet she couldn't handle her brain being opened and copied. He didn't even alter her memories. Maybe she was tired out from the futile resistance she was making, trying to muddle memories and tangle her thoughts. It was a sad attempt because her own chakra was rebelling against her, but Naruto wo 0 uld give her some credit. She had provided a mild hindrance. A spy drone was already on its way to Am. The sensor tied to the robot informed him that it was now 5 miles out of Kumogakure, proving that robots devoid of seals could fly to and fro over the technical village, as long as the security cameras were controlled by Naruto. The drone was carrying with it Conan's and the others' Akatsuki ring and voice message. Your assassination attempt on me has failed. Only Zetsu remains, but I will have his head soon enough. You can have your rings, I don't think they'll need 'em anymore. Meet me in my demon country hideout in 2 days. We both know you know where I'm talking about. Come with your paths and without the intention to attack or harm. If you come any sooner or any later, then I'll turn Conan into a brainless vegetable, so much so that not even your Rinnegan can revive her. We both know I can do it. If you want to try me, then I dare you to come. Harming this messenger is equal to harming me. Do so and you'll be picking up pieces of Conan for centuries. He would sell the carcasses of the Akatsuki on a later date. Naruto stomped to Mikoto and sat her up against the wall, hog-tied like Conan. He looked at the unconscious woman for a moment and said, Your turn, I guess. Like with the other two, he placed his left gloved hand on her head and combined both sound and vibrations specific to Mikoto's chakra core, unlocking her tenketsu and destabilizing her core, thereby opening up her mind to Naruto's computer goggles when it processed the response to the sound and vibration. His forehead crinkled at the resistance. Strange. Her chakra was fighting against her chakra, and the offending chakra was winning. Typical signs of a person being under a genjutsu, except one cannot place an illusion on oneself. It just didn't make sense. Then he remembered that I had not just deflected her evolved Sharingan illusion but deflected it. That has to be why, I think. He focused into his goggles and lessened the power of his photon beam even more, experimentally trickling his foreign chakra into her body, one of the ways to dispel a genjutsu. The warring chakra gave way for him but went back at their squabble once his chakra passed them. The vibrations and sounds loosened up Mikoto's chakra and his own chakra eased open the gates ever so cautiously. The woman's brain bloomed over his head, but it was different. Different, like not how a human mind should look. There were two presences in her body, one a cool shade of blue and the other toxic red. They were meshed together in a combination of blazing numbers. He recognized the red mind, so much so he almost let go of her head in surprise. He pressed harder and turned the hologram to the merging side of the two minds. The Tsukuyomi, Naruto recalled, played before his very eyes. Mikoto Uchiha's POV, warning, graphic sexual assault. Normal POV, you can look now. Mind rad, that was the best way to describe what was happening to her. He watched for only half a minute before he went back to the red brain, prodding it for any kind of response, and immediately it changed to a docile gray-green, moving into his digital touch like an over-eager dog would to an owner. The illusion kept playing in her head while he cut eye from Mikoto's mind and saved the supercomputer's sentient mind into his spare goggles memory banks. He couldn't very well paste his friend into the spare because there was already a presence within the goggles. The goggles would crash and he would not only lose eye again but also the new, spare computer, which was much less sophisticated, far from a supercomputer but acceptably competent in handling Naruto's matters. He surfed through Mikoto's mind, after copying it all, and read that the Tsukuyomi was an illusion that made the victim suffer what felt like 72 hours of torture, but in reality it was mere minutes. She deserved her torture. He wiped out her memory, cleaning every nook and cranny of her brain, leaving her only the awareness of who she was and what was going to happen to her, merely surface memories of the past 13 years. Naruto released his grip on her head and waved his hand to her. His Gamma Fire combat drone hovered to its master with a muted buzz and carried the woman up into the air, bridal style between its surprisingly sturdy arms. The robot was ordered to drop the brainless woman 500 miles above the village, directly above the Hokage's mansion. It would be sudden and unexpected because he had not just cleared her brain of almost everything but he deactivated her chakra. She would see her death coming as she fell and she wouldn't be able to do anything. Another voice message on the robot. Leave me alone. Oh. Flashback end. The drone would be a few more minutes to Konoha by now. It was more than she ever deserved. He could have very well sold her to the Iwa black market as a slave, a fate globally known to be much worse than death. Naruto wanted to only use her as a message to his parents, as well as to all of Konoha. Cassie looked up at him with her eyebrows furrowed in what could pass off as a worry, still irked at him. You okay? I'm fine, just thinking about something. Wanna tell me? He studied her for a second, how her eyes fleetingly looked up into his every once in a while before going back down to assembling the last parts of the magnet. He stood up and walked to her, kneeling down on the other side of the fairly large magnet. She flinched and he sighed. I'm not going to hurt you, you know. I know, she said, and he saw that she meant it. I'm not used to sitting this close to a boy close to my age. What about Omoi? She wasn't even surprised he knew about him. Cousin Omoi is 12 and he's my cousin. He doesn't count. He shrugged and looked up at his instructions. Seems all you needed were the instructions. She hadn't once asked him to explain something to her. It was her turn to shrug, keeping her eyes firmly down as she screwed down a thin sheet of metal onto the delicate part of the magnet, like the illustration. You didn't need my help with your homework, did you? He looked at her knowingly and she pouted in silence, still working. He drew out her name playfully. Cassie. Fine. She dropped the screwdriver and picked up a switch Naruto had invented to turn on and off the magnet remotely. She began attaching the necessary wires to the switch, looking to the instruction, the illustration and briefly at him. Her hands moved in a flurry. I wanted us to hang out. You seemed smart. I'm not smart anymore. No, you're smarter. Back then you were this university graduate that majored in engineering, now you're some kind of, a super genius. Tech gloves, tech boots, robot hoverboards, a freaking supercomputer, and I bet you're filthy stinking rich. She kept her eyes down, her shoulders heaved out a sigh and she paused. Way out of my league now. Don't belittle yourself, Cassie. I won't be here if I didn't think you could do this. You're smart. She scoffed. PSHH, thanks, I guess. He exhaled with a small frown, then said, my real name is Naruto. Her eyes glinted as she looked up at him. I know. For how long? Since that fight in front of the store. And you didn't tell anyone. Why? You had to have your reasons for running away. Plus, I'm not stupid. I know what they'll do to you if they catch you. Thanks. She smiled at him, warmly, and nodded. Don't mention it. She put in the finishing touches and sat back on her knees, her fists on her hip. Done. She made to lift it onto the hoverboard, knowing very well that it weighed up to 3 times her body weight. Don't worry about that. Naruto held out his left hand and the glove zipped into place, arming itself and fully powering on. He bent down and carried the human-sized magnet, gently dropping it onto the hoverboard. Take it to Demon Country. The flying tech board whizzed out of the window and Naruto unarmed his left glove. The girl didn't seem shocked at the feat of strength, not after he had carried her father to bed without the glove. He dug into his pocket and held out 4 bank cards to her banks of lightning, darkness, fire and waterfall. I programmed them to accept any pin you type. Try not to lose them. She plucked out 1 bank of waterfall, and pushed the rest back to him. 1 will be fine. I won't even know how to spend it, but I'll find a way. I owe you much more than money, Cassie. Thank you for your help. He stood back and bowed deeply to her. Her blush came back in full force and she pushed him to straighten up. It was really nothing, Naruto. He looked at her, hesitant, then he said. My contact info is in your phone, under Kyohi. Don't hesitate to call me if you need anything. And I mean anything. Money, tutoring, advice, someone to talk to, I really don't mind. She laughed a little and gave him a slight smile. I will. She bent down and picked up his holo disc. He shook his head. You can keep it. When I upgrade its model, then I'll send a better version to you. But what if someone steals it? They'll wish they never stole it. Bleep, bleep, bleep. He stalked to the computer and gathered his things, removing the cord in his goggles and fixing the visor, taking out the flash drive and tossing it into his backpack with the black cord and the holo disc. He shut down the computer and tapped the screen on his goggles. 1. Full system reboot required. Approximately 6 hours. He fixed the goggles onto his forehead as the supercomputer started rebooting. He zipped up his back and slung it onto his back as best as he could. Cassie came over and helped him slid his left hand through the left strap. Where will you be going? Demon Country. To do what? Launch a rocket into space. He said it so candidly, so frankly, that she didn't look unbelieving. She stopped being surprised a while ago. And after that, off the continent, he walked to the window and his sneakers slowly changed into his combat boots, arming themselves. The silver plates crept up and stopped under his knees, under his pants. Find an island and spend the rest of my life in solitude. That's depressing. He smiled at her and poked her forehead. Life is depressing. He sat down on her window and flung his legs to the other side. His boots burst with soft white energy, keeping him balanced outside in the air. Cleaning drones in his mountain base began packing up his things, charges with his weapons in them clumped together, as if magnetically attracted, and flew off into the night, followed soon after by the compacted boxes that were his combat and suicide drones. All of his controlled by his chakra, though still near invisible to natural senses. The dead bodies and the unconscious Angel of Am were flown to Demon Country as well. Cassie leaned out of the window, marveled by his tech boots. I was never here. He waved to her with a broad smile. Good night, Cassie. He whizzed off in a blast of air, leaving her to wave at nothing but the odorless white smoke he left in his wake. Good night, Naruto. 3 days later. Naruto's cliffside hideout. Demon Country. Dark Rinnegan eyes stared at the boys turned back with unhidden disdain. The waves crashed and smashed into the shores of his cliffside hideout. Pain didn't see his serene smile as he watched the landscape of water thrash and smash against the rocks, never truly able to reach him. The thunderstorm had subsided to a low, almost casual drizzle. The view was nice. Where is Conan? The Deva path asked, the other paths standing to its side. After a charged silence, Naruto said, somewhere relatively safe. He tossed the Akatsuki ring over his shoulder. The corpse caught the tiny object. Naruto had also taken the privilege of nullifying all the seals on her person, so no tracking seal could find her. I want us to talk, Nagato. The boy looked over his shoulder with a secret smile. About Conan's safety. That will be it for this video. If you want more, comment down below, like, subscribe. And see you guys later.